Whether you're against Bitcoin SV, BSV, or you're a person who holds it, you need to hear this out. Stick around to the end of this outline because, for one, money is always changing. And while we have heard that Bitcoin is part of the new money, it is the new money. What is the BSV connection to that new money? How about this for size? Elon Musk, shout out to Satoshi, a finding from a while back, that he is going to use some version of Bitcoin. Why not just come out and just say, yeah, we're using Bitcoin? Or we're going to use BTC. That wasn't mentioned. Stick around to the end of the outline. You'll be glad that you heard all the presented material. Smash the like if you haven't done so already. And if anything, let's get into some of the material. New, old, why it all matters. And more importantly, is there any type of government connection? Is there people that are in office that recognize Bitcoin, the real Bitcoin, in my opinion? BSV, their technology. Let's jump into it. All right, so here we go. This first thing being mentioned here, let's talk about new innovation, new news. You guys need to hear about it, right? So the Mandala Upgrade, may not be pronouncing it right, but don't shoot the messenger. I want to get into this because it is crucial, and it was not that long ago, this report, and I meant to get into this at the beginning of the month, but we talked about this on the live show, and if you weren't aware, new architecture to the BSV network inspired by the intricate design of traditional mandalas. This upgrade is designed to enhance availability, scalability, and operational efficiency by integrating a small world network core surrounded by specialized, quote, overlay networks. Now, I've done deep dive in regards to overlays and particularly like BSV, but you know, when it comes to specifically speaking, BSV and the concept of the Bitcoin peer-to-peer cash system, well, they haven't lost that vision and that focus. So listen to this. We'll come back and we'll get more into the material and why this particular upgrade matters so much. Here we go.
BSV blockchain is pleased to announce its new Mandala Upgrade, a major network enhancement that realizes the original vision of an unboundedly scalable blockchain aligned with the Bitcoin white paper. Much like the literal mandala, which forms recursively from an unbounded number of smaller networks mirroring its form, the BSV mandala network consists of three components. At the center is the core node network, surrounded by outer components that include service providers and users, all leveraging the core node network's capabilities. These three key components work together to unlock new potential for the BSV blockchain. The first component is Terranode, the core of the upgrade. Terranode handles massive transaction volumes and keeps a global record, ensuring the network runs smoothly and efficiently. This feature gives the BSV blockchain its outstanding advantage among other blockchains. Terranode enables an ultra-scalable Layer 1 blockchain with high throughput capabilities and high security. It also provides resiliency, hyperconnectivity, and global accessibility to the network, setting the stage for the future of blockchain technology. The next component is overlay services. Overlay services allow for the creation of specialized logic circuits and digital patterns dealing with business logic and creating dedicated environments. They help distribute network load and make advanced transaction features accessible. This component ensures operational specialization, as overlay services are tailored to specific transaction types or business functions. It also enables private and permissioned capabilities, balancing openness with customized access control, enhancing security for specialized use cases. And the final component, SPV wallets, which enable true peer-to-peer transactions, allowing you to send and receive digital microtransactions directly without needing a middleman. They leverage the simplified payment verification method as outlined in Section 8 of the Bitcoin white paper to allow instant peer-to-peer on and offline transactions. SPV wallets contribute to the BSV blockchain being secure, scalable, and cost-efficient with minimal resource requirements for application builders. The Mandala Upgrade transitions the BSV network to a more distributed system that allows complex interactions, making it simple and efficient to use, whether online or offline. The upgrade is being rolled out in stages. The SPV wallet reference implementation is already live in public beta, with overlay services coming soon. Terranode, recently tested at 1 million transactions per second with 6 nodes in a dedicated environment, is expected to begin testing some functionality on the mainnet by late 2024. Find out more about the Mandala upgrade at bsvblockchain.org.
Really glad to be able to share some of that with you, right? Because, for all of us, it's like, interesting, seeing that there's updates and why these things matter, right? Let's take you over to this next part. This is actually straight from bsvblockchain.org. Now, why I'm going to show this key area is because, I did talk about the whole thing about governments. So if you go to here, it says ready to add blockchain solutions to your business or government agency. Send them a message, blah, blah, blah. Some other sites could basically boast this, but is there really a connection? I think the answer is yes. And where I'm going with this is this. Enter in this gentleman, Congressman Bill Foster. He represents the 11th District of Illinois. Why is that important? Well, a while back, he had an interview. And you guys know this guy, right? You're familiar with the one and only Jimmy Wen. But a while back, a few years ago, it's this interview. And it pounds it home when it comes to the whole idea of policy and why it matters. So U.S. Congressman Bill Foster being interviewed by Jimmy Wen. Listen to this. You don't think that the real Bitcoin has any connections to the government? Maybe you're new to some of this. I don't say that disrespectfully, but if you're the person that you're, for example, BTC maxing, and you're like, nah, they don't got nothing going on, nothing new, and so on. For one, we just shared something new. But you got to hear this as well, and then I'm going to connect it to another particular thing and why that's big. Let's get into the material. Here we go.
So let's wrap up by talking about, we've talked about many of the concerns with the growth of blockchain technology and digital assets. What are the good uses that you see blockchain technology can bring to the world, and how is the Congressional Blockchain Caucus helping to shape policy to bring out the good parts?
Yeah, well, I think that things like land registries are a perfect example of things where you just want an immutable record. So when someone sells you the Brooklyn Bridge, you want to know, you'd be able to look at the blockchain, figure out, okay, does this person actually own the Brooklyn Bridge? What exactly is the footprint of the Brooklyn Bridge that you've purchased along with it, and so on and so forth. What are the easements on the Brooklyn Bridge? And so this is, I think, the killer app. There's lots of things having to do with a lot of the concerns that I've been sort of focusing on here disappear if they're very low value things. So that if you're just, like you're clicking on something and you want to pay, you just read a pretty good article and you want to pay them a half a penny for writing that nice article, micropayments. Yes. That would be something where what's at risk is small enough that you can tolerate a large amount of you still have to deal with click fraud, and I'm sure soon enough people will be money laundering by massive click fraud from country A to country B, but that probably can be made detectable enough that it won't become big. And so for small value transactions, for things like supply chain security, I think that's one where there really could be a killer app early. Just when you buy something, if you call it up on the screen and you say, this product, they're pretty much equivalent, but this product was made 85% of the value added came from a country that respects the rule of law and doesn't abuse workers. And this one only 40%. And the 60% of it came from countries that abuse workers. I would even pay a little bit more, and I think most people would. And so that blockchain potentially allows you to report that. It will travel with the product as it flows through and has value added.
Track the source of origin. Source of origin.
Yeah, the source of origin and some of the details are there. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, this is a single country, because if you look at an iPhone, people say, oh, it comes from China. Well, actually, no. The great majority of the value added. Places, yes. Yeah. And so it'd be interesting to say, okay, here's an iPhone and here's some different phone. and you say, okay, the iPhone, and 75% of it comes from countries that respect the rule of law, and this other one only 20%. That could be a big factor. And blockchain, together with certified inspectors and auditors, because if someone can't just claim that they don't use child labor, they have to have a trusted authority come in and audit them and do snap inspections to make sure they actually don't use child labor. And so that there's an infrastructure around that could be tied together with blockchain.
Well, I'm glad you summarized a lot of those, because that's exactly the type of usage we're trying to build with our BSV blockchain ecosystem, because we're massively scaling to allow micropayments, take advantage of a public ledger so that there's more honesty to the information and you can trace. But as you mentioned, it doesn't replace the human touch, right? The data that goes into a blockchain is only so good as the human decisions and actions that lead to it. But I think you've summarized well some of the great use cases of blockchain technology.
And the ID, this auditor, right? This auditor who's going to audit and make sure you don't use child labor, they have to have a digitally traceable ID. And so the starting point is for that auditor to authenticate himself as someone that we can go after if he's lying about child labor.
Well, that's a great way to end.
It's a great frontier. Yeah. That's why I'm so enthusiastic about blockchain as a technology.
Yeah, and I think you've really helped to hone in on why so much of the power of blockchain technology in the future will begin and depend on strong identity systems that can be allow people not just to trace where things come from, but to test the credibility and authenticity of where data and actions come from on a blockchain. I want to really thank you for taking time to speak with us today, Representative Foster, and we look forward to engaging with your office and so many other members of Congress as you help shape policy that affects this industry and technology sector. And I want to thank you for being interested in this space and really leading the way in trying to shape policy opinions in the United States and abroad. Thank you very much.
Okay, really cool to share that as well. Nice to get some insight, especially when it comes to policymakers, and this particular gentleman, this congressman from Illinois, giving his perspective of, blockchain and why it simply makes sense in those examples that he used. So moving along, I got this for you as well. I want to pull this up on the screen. And this comes from BSV blockchain. And what's really important for the understanding is, like what it says here. And it goes on to mention that there's this guy, his name is Ty Everett. If you weren't aware, he's the CEO of Project Babbage. Now, I'm not going to do a deep dive on that today. That'll be another day. But they talk about the ultimate inevitability of Bitcoin's metamorphosis, which is ironically back to its original design. Don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget the whole idea that the concept of why everything blossomed, the concept of, not just distributed ledger technologies and so on, but that original core concept of a peer-to-peer cash system with scalability. That's where it's at. Now, as I clicked on this particular article, I took the liberty to read it, and it led me down, of course, the rabbit hole, but I decided to take you to this section. So I'm going to take off a little bit of that branding for you can see a little bit of it without it covering up the screen. It talks about the history of Bitcoin. Now, I'm not going to get really into the weeds of this, and while we'll talk more about history and cash here in a bit, this statement, I think, is spot on. Because it says the history of Bitcoin is one full of people struggling to understand these things. Again, beginning an outline. Are you a BTC maxi? Are you a person that holds BSV as well? Do you hold both? Are you for or against scalability, innovation, and so on because of a narrative? Maybe you heard the whole thing of, Craig Wright and, that's something I never want to get into. Or are you a person that realizes it's about innovation, not necessarily just a retail narrative? And while we cover some of these things in the past, I want you to understand some of these things. So again, people struggling to understand these things. This is spot on. It's a history full of people going in the wrong direction, realizing that they are the entire premise. On top of which they've predicated their Bitcoin business or their idea was wrong and was unscalable and wouldn't work. Everett specifically referenced other altcoins and other competing blockchains which had been led down, the wrong path. It goes on to mention the entire ecosystem of other attempts at creating things using Bitcoin technology is evidence of this. This is a great point. But now, at last, they think they have gotten to the point where people have shed enough blood trying to fail at doing different things, trying to create different approaches to this technology, where we've finally arrived at some lessons and some understandings about what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin is for and how it can be used. And of course, that's what he's excited about. Well, I'm excited about just sharing some of these key findings with you, right? So again, it led me down the rabbit hole. This is from fintechmagazine.com. It's an article in regards to BSVA Terranode testing. Now, I myself and many others have shared more than enough times in regards to the impressive results from Terranode, right? 1 million, and even at the beginning of the outline saying that it could do 5 million consistently on the TPS, and even showed, for example, in the past that we have that reported 9 million TPS. So that's absolutely huge, and be able to see it scale from there, it's just absolutely amazing, right? Well, look at this. Look what it literally says, and I've gone ahead and pulled it down on this article. It's about boosting transaction volumes. It says the BSVA's claim that its BSV network will be capable of, maintaining, quote, never before seen transaction volumes at least 10 times higher than the Visa and MasterCard networks combined. I mean, that statement in itself, I mean, come on, supply and demand forces, Sometimes we see particular cryptocurrencies have their pumps and whatnot people are like, why did that happen? Again, supply and demand forces. What's really going on? So it says, away from financial transactions, it is said that Terranode will enable BSV blockchain to process vast amounts of data, underpinning data indexing and broadcast services to power a more private and ownership-based internet experience. Again, back to the Congressman you just heard from Illinois. With this comes greater protection of private data, personal content, and IP rights through timestamp verification. So, Terranode, the potential to ensure AI applications run properly with verifiable and auditable information while seamlessly integrating with Web3 and IPv6 upgrade. That's where it's at for me, and I'm glad to, of course, share some of these findings because sometimes you just need it from that literal point of view, and especially Visa and MasterCard, that's a big deal. All right, the next part I want to get into is one of the key highlights and showcases of this outline tonight on this deep dive. So, some of you guys are familiar with Centi, C-E-N-T-I. And just giving you a background about them, they're headquartered in Zurich, Switzerland. But their motto, transforming digital payments for business or your business. They have like innovative payment processing. Think about some of these terms. Digital currency solutions, streamline your business operations. They provide, of course, fintech solutions. Now, when I jumped over to their site, what really stood out is some of these statements. And let's just go ahead and pull that up for you. And of course, it's this. And it talks about the concept, basically speaking, of, well, back to the main topic, electronic cash payment to benefit consumers and merchants alike. That sounds like that's in alignment with the Bitcoin white paper. It says that at Centi, they think they can drastically change the way payments are perceived. The Bitcoin technology, and notice how it says not just Bitcoin, but it says Bitcoin SV technology, allows us to make the payment experience multilateral and provide real value as solutions which will be much more than just another payment option. It says click on updates below and be the first to know when the features come out in the products and so on. But that's a bold statement. And again, that matches up even with the beginning of the outline about a electronic cash payment system, a peer-to-peer cash system, right? The original Bitcoin white paper. As I clicked on the team from Senti, it led me down the rabbit hole of this guy. And his name is Dr. Jürg Conzett. And wow, what a background on this particular individual. Now, I'm not just trying to get into the deep weeds of content just to do it for the sake of jumping into history, but I can respect this guy and his background being a historian. I myself, a former history teacher. So he is from University of Zurich. He also has an MBA. I didn't get mine from Stanford, but I can respect that he's a successful businessman. He's involved in private equity. He's an investor. He is what they call a money philosopher. And in this outline, you will see the areas that I fast forwarded to, because again, it's a long interview, but he talks about money in it from a perspective that maybe you just haven't heard. And I think that's important. So he was an early force behind Oanda.com and is the president of Sunflower Foundation, which operates in Zurich Money Museum. Money Museum? Yeah, he has a museum that talks about the history of money. So this guy gets it. And again, he's part of the board over at Senti. All right, what else do we got in regards to him, and why is he such an important player? Well, for one, he is a founder and president of this money museum. And look at this. It says he studied history, psychology at the University of Zurich. He also graduated back in 1972 with his doctorate from the management school at Stanford. Excuse me, that was for his MBA in 1976. His doctorate came from University of Zurich. I spoke on that. But several years in New York, Tokyo, and he worked at Citibank. Now, you guys know I cover other projects where we talk a lot about Citibank. But look what it says in regards to like what he's done in regards to global investments. Citibank, as a finance analyst, trained him in global investment management. As a member of management of the Dow Banking Corporation Zurich from 1982 to 86, he drafted the bank's investment management policy. And also at the Bank of Cantrade, in Zurich, from 86 to 1990, a subsidiary of UBS, he was the director responsible for financial analysis and investment policy. In this outline, if you haven't taken that, we talked a lot about policy and policy makers and what they're connected to yet, that I don't know what to tell you. But since 1990, this gentleman has worked independently in investment management. And from 99, his main concern has been Sunflower Foundation, its platforms, and the Conzett Verlag. Okay? So this guy knows a thing or two, is because he's seen this thing or two, right? I hate to use the analogy, but it's a good one. But there was an interview from CoinGeek a while back with him, and it's Jürg Conzett. Money is always changing, it states. I've gone ahead and fast forwarded to this part of this interview. This is one of the main showcases that you want to hear, and it's incredibly, not just interesting, it's fascinating. Money is always changing. Why is it important? And does this gentleman mention specifically Bitcoin SV? The answer is yes, multiple times. But why does it matter? Where are we really going with Bitcoin? And will it truly be the new cash system? The answer is yes. But more importantly, will Bitcoin SV follow the original white paper by Satoshi Nakamoto for a peer-to-peer cash system? And if anything, with scalability. Check this out. Here we go.
Well, let's turn to Bitcoin now. We're at the CoinGeek conference here in Zurich, discussing Bitcoin SV in particular. How does the emergence of Bitcoin in all of its various forms fit into your ideas about the history of money as you've studied it? How new and how revolutionary is the idea of Bitcoin?
Well, first of all, it's very new and it's very revolutionary, that's true. And the governments around the world were frightened because when Bitcoin has risen substantially, they say, what do we do if people or part of the people go and exchange, the transaction with Bitcoin. What happens to us? What happens to our taxes? How can we control? So they must be in horror and say, we have to do something. You can forbid Bitcoin, but that's very difficult. You can make taxes around Bitcoin, but that's also pretty tough. So what they decided is to tokenize the central bank money supply, and that has huge ramification, because up to the present we have money supply of the central bank, but most of the money we use is banking money, and in the future there will be basically only central bank money. And China has also already introduced it and has experience, and European Union wants to introduce it in 2025. Facebook will introduce a digital dollar, I think still this year. So it goes very fast, and what will happen is that up to the present time, we think nations spend more money than they take in, and they make a debt, national debt. But in the future, there will be no national debt anymore, because it will be just money. It will be spread among all citizens.
Because the governments can't create credit.
But because the central bank would incorporate it into the government, will be not independent anymore. It will be run by politicians. Our head of European Central Bank is a very experienced politician. And then basically, if a nation needs more money, they can create it. There is no need to go to the capital market. And in practice, it's already happening. Why did the central bank money supply increase by 7 in the last 10 years? Where did the money go? Well, the EU central bank bought up the debt of several of friends of the southern states, and it will be spread afterwards. Today, it's still as a debt, but everybody knows it will not be repaid, and it will be spread as money. That could create inflation, of course. And so politicians have a lot of power with a digitized money supply, but they have a tremendous responsibility. And we will see how they go about this responsibility. And that is where Bitcoin will come in. If they double again, or times 7 in the next 7 years, as they have done in the past, then there will be pressure to bring also money on the blockchain. Because once it's on the blockchain, at least in BSV, it will be public. It will be public knowledge what they do, if they create and how they spend it.
But there seems to be an irony here, because when Bitcoin was invented, there was a lot of talk of being independent of governments and central banks. But what you're saying is that it's almost going to make governments and central banks more powerful, because we used to talk about printing money, but they can now bring money into existence through these digital currencies just by...
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin. Once the money is fully digitized, the government has a lot of power, because they can see exactly what we do with the money. It can also be digital. For example, China has not brought it on the blockchain, but they just digitized it. So what I'm saying is that Bitcoin should not be separate from the government. I mean, it should be public. People say it's anonymous, but it's not really anonymous.
No, but could the digitization of money by central banks have happened without Bitcoin having been invented?
Yes, that is what's happening now. China has digitized their currency, but not with Bitcoin, not with a blockchain.
But they've probably done it in response to the existence of Bitcoin.
Well, I think if you want, we had a philosopher in the 17th century, Leibniz, and he looked around and said, we have to automate this calculation. And he has seen that the Chinese had a dual, yin and yang. And they said, well, maybe I could make a system out of that. And it's a binary system, 0 and so 1. So every block in a blockchain has only 0 and 1. And today we can not only calculate, but we can also pictures and everything which is in writing. So I think the Chinese at the time missed the science. They missed the 17th century. And that's why in the 19th century they lost against the British. And they said that never happens to us again. And they studied Leibniz very well and said, what can we do in digitization? And that's why they became world leaders in digitization. And so they began their digitized central bank money project 8 years ago. And finally they introduced it now. So they are about 5 years ahead of us.
And do you welcome this digital central bank money, or?
I think it's natural. Our credit, I call our money the credit money because it's created as a credit. And it had a tremendous push function to push people to progress, to always run more.
Because they had to pay back the...
Yeah, no, yes, but the amount of credit should never be getting smaller. It has expanded for 500 years. In the war, it could be reduced, but then the government comes in and makes war and expands again. So that puts on a lot of pressure. So if you hit the pandemic, you cannot stop the economy, or you have a big problem. And that has all advantages, but also disadvantages. We had a tremendous increase in wealth, that is true, but I think now it's time to get a different kind of money.
Well, so if we were, 20 years or however long it's going to take ahead, and central bank digital currencies had come in and were widely used, what would be the equivalent situation if something like the pandemic came along? Would we be better or worse off?
With the new money?
With the new money, yes. How would we respond in a different way?
You see, our money now is a promise in the future. And I think with digitized money, that doesn't change. So I think it's still the same situation. You still have the same pressure to grow.
Right.
But eventually, we'll see what the politicians will do with their power. But they could move onto the blockchain, let's say in 8 years. Because today, we now have to first to increase the token economy. It has to. I have on my phone, I have about 7 or 8 tokens of private companies which are digitized, which I could shift around. But in a few years' time, that's very normal, and it will be a large token economy, and so people have experience. And if the government has difficulties because they increase the money supply too much, which is possible, but I'm not predicting that, but it's possible, then there will be people demanding that it's moved onto the blockchain because then it's public. Then you see what's happening. And I think if people see what's happening, there will be pressure,
political
to
pressure.
stop it. Yeah.
And we're here at the CoinGeek conference talking about Bitcoin SV. What do you see its role in this big picture that you're describing?
Well, the big vision of BSV or Craig is that, or he sees that only in the end only one big blockchain will survive. It will be the biggest because it will be a network and it will concentrate. He prepares everything on that event sometime in the future to be that leading blockchain in the world.
And how do you think it's going to happen to get from here to there? What will be the key drivers of that change?
Well, the key driver is if people make services, micropayment, but registers, many thousand things. Governments, are hesitant, but they cannot block it. And the driver will be if there is a big token economy ecosystem growing. And that takes, I would say, 10 years. So we will have a central bank, digitized central bank money on one hand, which is digital, and we have a growing token economy based on blockchain. And then we'll see part will be Ethereum, or part will be other things, and in my opinion, there will be one blockchain which attracts most because it will be the most efficient. And the most efficient, I think, will win.
You talked about tokens and how you already have a number of tokens which have their own value. I'm just worried that if that token economy really does well, if I end up with hundreds of different little piles of tokens that are each worth a different amount, the whole thing is going to be very confusing, and I'm not going to be really sure what I've got.
Well, if you're an investor like myself, you can choose between 5,000 stocks worldwide, approximately. But you can go on coinmarketcap.com and look how many coins could I buy, and it's also about 5,000. So at the present time, it may be confusing, but I think that's why important that Facebook is coming with their service, and people get used to getting tokens on their smartphones. So it's getting used to it. And for example, in China, they are years ahead. Most people do their banking and their insurance, their credit, all on the internet.
Yes, we should probably draw this to a close, but can we just go back to the big picture and your study of history? In your description of a world in which we all own many different kinds of tokens, which each have a different value, is there anything in the history of money that reminds you of? Or is this a unique thing that hasn't happened before?
No, let's take China. China has been an empire for 2,000 years. China always had many different, not tokens that were good. So you could pay with silver. They liked silver. You could pay with silk. You can pay with, I had, tea leaves, pressed tea leaves, quite valuable. Or they had these cash coins. So if somebody says, I pay you, you could talk to him in what currency. Do you want, if you want a house, probably it was more silver or silk or porcelain. So he had many different things. He was used to it. We think there is only one kind of money because the government has the monopoly. It says only my money is valid. So we are going to hopefully do a time where I say, look, you can work with me, but I cannot pay you. I give you lodging, I give you other things.
Right.
And we'll see how governments react to that.
And is that an improvement, do you think? Or
I think it will be a big improvement. It will, all these people out of work will say, okay, I do something. Today in Switzerland, we have a lot of people working for time. Time is not taxed. So if you're older, you say, oh, somebody comes with me for shopping and so on, and you can go into debit in time, and it's a time exchange. and that's quite popular in around the world, but also in Switzerland.
Do you think that all these changes will make us think of the idea of money as being a less definite and monolithic idea than we've thought of it up until now?
That will be, it takes time, 10 years at least or more, but I think it's a good thing that it diversifies. And we will get a different government, we will get a different society, but I think it will be a more just society.
And will governments welcome that, or will they be resistant to it?
I think at first they will be resistant because they will change, as they could lose taxes. And but if people want, I mean, the government is the representative of people. If really people want to go in that direction, and historically, I think it's a good and a valid and intuitive, correct way. Yeah, it will happen.
Dr. Conzett, thank you so much, and very heartening, really, to see the idea of people and humanity being brought back into the world of economics. So I welcome that, and thank you so much for your time today.
You're most welcome.
It's interesting to hear perspectives, right? So the last part. Shout out to Satoshi. Give him a follow if you haven't done so already. A lot of you guys follow Satoshi. He found this snippet a while back and shared it, of course, on his channel. And I thought it was just an absolute fantastic find. I mean, I didn't discover it until now. It's not really time sensitive, right? The bottom line is, like what you see on the screen, it states they are using some version of Bitcoin. And you might have to rewind it and play it again and again and again to hear it. Satoshi, of course, says it out loud as well. But think about this statement from this X space. Here we go.
As far as free Twitter, I don't really know yet, but someone showed me this other site that looks pretty interesting. I think they maybe figured out what I've been wanting to do in terms of with free social media and micropayments on the blockchain. It looks really good. I think they use some version of Bitcoin, but the site wants to replace Twitter actually, so I need to try it out a bit more.
There we go. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Like, my goodness me. So he says they're using some version of Bitcoin. Well, that version happens to be BSV. So now he's looking into it. So it really wasn't going to take long at all, because Elon seems actually to be a smart cookie. So he understands the value proposition that Bitcoin has actually got when it can be used properly. Absolutely phenomenal.
So there you have it. Elon Musk. You really think he's talking about scalability with BTC? 4 to 7 TPS? The Pony Express of crypto, basically? Nah. If anything, it has to be the scalable one. And I'm putting my bet, of course, still on BSV. Let me know what you guys think in regards to all the presented material. Do you like this type of format? Getting into the weeds of from a historical point of view and so on? Let me know down in the comments if you like it. So if you don't, that's okay too. We do welcome other perspectives. Again, smash the like on your way out. Share it with others. Learn more about some of these innovative technologies. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.